Thank you. Thanks for having me. I love Netherlands, so I was happy to come. So I normally don't travel too much to festivals and conferences anymore, as I'm busy working on new games and stuff and spending my time with family. However, when I was asked to present Machinarium Postmortem here in Netherlands, 15 years after the game was released originally, I thought it actually makes perfect sense because this is where it all began. In 2001, I was on a study exchange here in Maastricht, not far from here, and it was during that time that I first came up with the idea of a world inhabited solely by robots. And I'll dive into that shortly, but first let me give you a brief introduction to our studio. We are Amanita Design. We are based in Prague, Czech Republic. We've been around since 2003. We are an indie studio because we are fully independent. It means we are self-owned and we are also self-publishing our titles. Currently, we have 4 teams. Altogether, it's about 25 people. And we are now working on 3 new digital games and 1 desktop game. This picture is old, but never mind. We primarily create hand-drawn adventure and puzzle games. So far, we've released Samorest series, Botanicula, Chuchel, and Happy Game by my colleague Jara Plachy, Machinarium, Creeks, and Pilgrims. I don't know if maybe some of you don't know, even don't know what the Machinarium is, so here's the trailer for the game. It's the original trailer with just gameplay, nothing else. So this is a picture from 2009, the year Machinarium was released on PC. And it shows the team that work on the game. Basically, we had 1 specimen of each profession. From left, it's me, game designer. Then there's David Oliva, programmer, Tomáš Dvořák, musician, another Tomáš Dvořák, sound maker or Foley maker. Then there's Adolf Lachman, graphic artist, and Václav Blín in the front, animator, and also second animator, Jara Plachy. So I'll mention some of my colleagues and their roles later, but first let me talk about some of the inspirations behind the game and what influenced us. The biggest inspiration by far is real life. Real world. I mean, in case of Samorest series, it was wild nature. In case of Machinarium, it's more about machines and robots and stuff like that. So we were inspired by old industrial buildings, rusty machines, and such things, which we love to explore. We love to. Many of my colleagues, including myself, love to go out and explore some neglected brownfields, stuff like that. Beside that, we owe a lot to fairy tales, especially Czech, German, and Eastern European fairy tales, which are full of classical characters like dragons, devils, kings, and princesses, water sprites, and talking animals. And characters in fairy tales are usually pretty straightforward. pure and archetypal, which makes fairy tales easy to understand, but they are not necessarily simple or shallow. In fact, the opposite is true in many cases. A good fairy tale captures the essence of human experience and reflects cultural values. We used exactly these fairy tale characters in our more recent smaller game, Pilgrims, but even Machinarium is deeply influenced by fairy tales. And apart from fairy tales, we also draw inspiration from a wide range of books, films, and other forms of art. Personally, I'm deeply influenced by works of J.R. Tolkien, because he built fully functioning universe, complete with his own legends, gods, races, heroes, and he even invented several languages. And Tolkien's world is remarkably believable and consistent in every detail, and that's why it continues to be so exciting and inspiring until today. And additionally, many science fiction books have shaped our games, most notably probably the works of Polish author Stanisław Lem. Also, films have been a significant influence for us, particularly Czech animated films. For example, this is from a film of famous Czech director Karel Zeman. It's called The Fabulous World of Jules Verne from 1958, where Zeman seamlessly blended illustrations and stop-motion animation with live actors and scenes. Yet the result was nicely coherent because everything fit perfectly together, and that's important in games as well. Also, he used, besides his film are very adventurous, he used very sophisticated sense of humor, and the films never took themselves too seriously, which makes them feel very fresh and modern even today. In this case, he designed and painted all the props and costumes and sets to resemble the classic illustration of Jules Verne books. So there's a conceptual level of things. This is another example of huge influence. This is Hey Mr. Let's Play by Bretislav Pojar and Miroslav Štěpánek, Czech series for kids, but with great sense of humor. The art technique was also quite unique, as the puppets were created semi-relief on and stop-motion animated on glass with the background underneath. It also has a great sense of humor, and there's plenty of animation tricks which inspires us a lot. And of course, we were also inspired by games. These are some very important examples. I think the connections between these games, if you know them, and Machinarium are quite obvious. Now let's get to the actual work on the game. I've mentioned that it all started here in Netherlands during my study exchange. I was attending an art school in Maastricht, but I didn't like the school that much. And so I was rather staying at a dorm where I didn't have much to do, so I was bored. I also often sat in a coffee shop or on a train traveling around the Netherlands and just drew aimlessly, making sketches like these. And by the way, I believe occasional boredom is very important for kids and for adults as well, for creative people at least, because it allows your ideas, which are very deep in your brain, to bubble to the surface from your subconsciousness. And as I was, when I was traveling around Netherlands, I observed my surroundings, And I noticed that everything here is so well organized and neat and trimmed and a bit squared and boxy, which is nice. I love architecture here. But also people followed the rules so flawlessly, and everything appeared to have logical purpose, which is quite different from what I'm used in my country. And this inspired me to imagine a highly modern vertical city inhabited by robots. But this city and its inhabitants wasn't perfect at all. It was dirty, rusty, damaged, and simply it had some kind of soul of imperfection. I set these ideas aside for many years, but they resurfaced after we released Summers 2, and I began thinking about a new project. Summers 2, this is a picture from it, was released in 2005, it was our first commercial game, sold directly through our website. It was long before platforms like Steam and mobile devices took off, but it worked somehow. While we didn't get rich overnight, it earned enough to kickstart full-time development of new, bigger project. And since then, we are self-publishing all our games. So I started working or gathering ideas for the new game. I'll always drew very messy little sketches to my notebooks I carry with me all the time. At this time, I knew the game will be linear, story-driven adventure game with some puzzles set in fictional city. That was set, and so I was bringing some ideas to the table. And for the world where the game takes place, also for characters, for the story, and also for quests and puzzles. By the way, small notebooks and Fineliner is my favorite tool, like always was. Nowadays, I also use iPad with Procreate, but I still prefer to avoid any screen whenever possible and sit down somewhere under the tree and design ideas. I also started thinking about the main character, which is, of course, very important for a story-driven adventure game. My first idea was to create a game about an old shabby teddy bear that you could manipulate by pulling his head or arms or legs. But then, after some discussions with my colleagues, we switched to little funny robots and stick to that. So here's an evolution of Robot Josef, our main character. This is Josef and his girlfriend Berta, first tries. Yeah, this was almost it. We like that. And this is the final character that is used in the game. By the way, we named him Josef after Czech painter Josef Čapek, who invented the word robot. And his more famous brother, Karel Čapek, popularized the word in his play and book RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots, which premiered in 1921. And since then, the term robot has been used worldwide. Then I started inventing the city of Machinarium, or Machinarium. The pronunciation is okay both ways. We call it in Czech Machinarium. So this is the main tower where the city ruler resides. And this is the map of all the locations in Machinarium city. I would say that the setting is always crucial in our games. I believe it's even more important than the story we are trying to tell. In fact, the world we've created is one of the game's main features, alongside its story and gameplay. And therefore, it's essential that it's carefully and thoroughly designed and that it feels logical and believable. So one by one, I drew up all the scenes, including puzzles and everything. And drawing like these are the basis for the final level design. Now I would like to show you the process of creating a couple of scenes, from the initial ideas to the finished backgrounds. So here's the first concept sketch showing the composition and a few ideas. It's a mess. Only I barely understand. I can't even read those texts, basically. So. But that's fine. This is more precise sketch, which I already liked. And this is the same drawings already imported to computer with all game elements already in place in separate layers. This is the same drawing with some colors to test the atmosphere. And this is the first drawing from the artist, not from me. The main artist on Machinarium was Adolf Lachmann. I'll get to him soon, but originally we worked with other artist, Jakub Dvorsky, who did this drawing, but he didn't like the job that much and left us, so we had to find a new artist. So the drawing was made by pencil on paper, but now it's already scanned to a computer, and the artist applied some shading in Photoshop. Here it is with colors and some textures. And here's the final background with the character. This scene we call the bridge. And in this document you can see all Josef's standing positions where start his animations when he interacts with the other characters and the environment. This is, again, the drawing from the artist. This time, it's already made by Adolf Lachmann. Here it's almost finished, but we didn't like the far background. It felt somewhat cheap, or perhaps Disneyland-like. It wasn't great. So we discussed it with the artist, and he came up with a better version, which we used in the game. And that's our process. Until today, we discuss a lot. It's a ping pong. We talk a lot on each iteration. And in the final example, you'll notice that my rough sketches has a very few details. It's very, very rough and very messy. And it's somewhat intentional, not only that I'm lazy to draw it properly, but this approach leaves more room for artists to creatively interpret and add their own details and ideas. So it just sometimes it's just better to work with very vague image until later stages. So this is pencil drawing and finished scene. I'd like to take a moment to talk about the artist and the art technique we used. So this is Adolf Lachmann, who I met in 2007, and we've been working together ever since. He's a fantastic guy, talented digital and also classical painter. He's also a sculptor, conceptual artist, and musician, talented, and poet. And this is him in his atelier from the time when we were making Machinarium. He drew the whole game here on this table. And we spent some time developing the art style and eventually settled on clearly visible hand-drawn pencil sketch on paper, which was then colored and textured digitally in computer. The challenge was that Adolf, being an excellent graphic artist, had a hand that was too precise, making the drawings feel too tight and not relaxed enough, how we would love to. And since he's naturally right-handed, someone suggested he try drawing with his left hand. He gave it a shot, and it was perfect. It was exactly what we needed. So in the end, he drew all the scenes in the game that way, with his left hand. Here are some of the textures we use. We use mostly flat textures, flat surfaces like rusty metal plates, cracked surfaces, moldy walls, and so on. And we took these photos ourselves with a camera and stored them in an ever-growing library. It's our passion to collect textures, especially those very flat. Okay, let's talk about the narrative and animation side of things for a while. All our games follow simple stories with a traditional structure. The main character interacts with other characters, and at times they need to communicate directly with the players. So we needed a way to do this, but without using any real language, because we don't use text in our, well, it's not true anymore, but we didn't use any language and text in Machinarium for sure. And to avoid relying on text, we developed a unique approach, communication bubbles filled with animations and symbols. For example, in this case, it's very simple. We're using just a symbol of a battery that the bouncer needs for his robot teddy bear. Yeah. In this case, robot girl Berta tells Josef that she was kidnapped and imprisoned in a kitchen. And these communication bubbles were animated by Jara Plachy, whom he hired specifically for this job. And it was his first time working on a game. And he enjoyed it so much that he later decided to start his own project. So we supported him, found him a programmer, and a few years later, we released his game Botanicula, followed by Chuchel and Happy Game recently, all of which became very successful titles. But we lost an animator, the original team, I mean. We use these narrative bubbles also to show Josef's memories, which is a convenient way how to tell the backstory of and how to expand the world. In this location, Josef meets the first two bullies and recollects what they did to him in the past. And in this scene, we first learned that Josef used to have a girlfriend. My English, sorry. And that the screw sitting at the table is actually the third bully Josef knows from earlier. We like this kind of minimalistic narrative. It's good storytelling tactic because it's leaving much to players' interpretation. We don't need to know specifics about Josef and Berta relationship, and the words aren't important because the emotional message is very clear and almost everyone has some kind of similar experience they can relate to, which helps to make a bigger emotional impact. A lot can be told through simple animations and subtle details. For example, in this scene, the robot is inside an elevator. There is no surroundings or windows, so we can't actually see if the elevator is moving. However, when we press the buttons to send it up or down, we noticed the robot is either shrinking or stretching. Oh, sorry. Depending on the gravity. And this subtle animation is how we convey the motion of the elevator. So it's sometimes great to connect characters to their environment with these kind of subtle details. For example, if a robot standing near a railing, it might casually rest its hand on the railing for a moment, or they can lean against a wall. In such cases, you would even add a small shadow cast by their body, which doesn't cost much of work. And 10 minutes left. I need to hurry. Okay, so these kind of things are very helpful and quite cheap, and makes a big impact and big magic. Yeah. We also used communication for puzzles and gameplay tasks. For example, in this dialogue with a ventilator robot, once we wake him up, he starts giving very simple visual quizzes where the player must choose the answer. And most players naturally pick the correct answers, right? Which makes the robot happy and sleepy, and eventually causing him to fall asleep. But it doesn't help at all. So players then realize they need to choose the wrong answers, which makes the ventilator angry. And then he flies off in a rage, creating a free passage. Okay, and there are also some puzzles and mini games in Machinarium where we took some old designs from old puzzle books or from elsewhere, like this one. Sometimes we modified the puzzle or add some twist. However, since Machinarium, we only invent our own designs and own puzzles from scratch for all new games. And if, in case anyone is stuck in a game, we invented two-tier hint system. First, you press the light bulb icon, and it gives you just one visual hint in a thought bubble, suggesting what you should focus on. And if that doesn't help, you can play a simple minigame to unlock a complete walkthrough for a current scene, which we don't rely on text. Again, it's presented as a comic book rather than a traditional manual, which is more fun. Okay, let's talk about the audio in the game. On the left side, it's Tomáš Dvořák, our sound maker. He's not professional, but he is very creative. And on the right, it's Tomáš Dvořák again, but different guy with the same name, but who is musician. He's excellent. We work with him until today. He's quite famous musician, even with his own records. And he used a lot of classical instruments for recording and for composing. Finish it. This is his studio at that time. Nowadays it looks much better. But the soundtrack was very popular. We released it on vinyl as well, and we've sold almost 3,000 units to date, which is quite impressive considering how ancient vinyl record technology is. Of course, we made some merch, some plushies, t-shirts, limited edition of bronze statue even. But this is just for us, for our families, friends, business partners, and fans, but it's no real business, in case you are interested. As for technical solutions, I'll be very brief because that's not my field of expertise. Back in the day, we created a game in Adobe Flash, if you remember that. Animations were done in there, and it also ran in Flash on PC and later on mobile platforms. But we wanted to make also a console version, so a few years later, we decided to very laboriously transform the game to our own custom-made engine, which is a hell. But nowadays, it works on almost everything with a screen, on consoles of all kinds. And we regularly update the game, and there's one programmer who, yes, 5 minutes, who invented the engine, and he's still working on the game 15 years after that. We self-publish it on our web, later on Steam and other platforms. We did some marketing on our own, which we are not good at, but it worked. And so what happened after the game was released? So critical reception was very nice. There's a 95% of positive reviews on Steam, great reviews from critics. We got some awards. And the game sold almost 6 million copies until today across all platforms. And this is a revenue graph for the whole 15 years. And you can see the game is not dead yet, which is nice. So that's why I didn't called my presentation post-mortem, because it's still living. But I think it's fair and important to say that we were very lucky to be in the right place at the right time more than once. We were fortunate that digital distribution had already taken off, so we didn't need a publisher, which would have taken a large share of our revenue. We released our game still at the beginning of the indie game movement, when media and gamers were really interested in indie titles, and there weren't that many available yet. And we also had a perfect game for iPad and mobile devices just as they were becoming popular. In fact, people from Apple reached to us several times to convince us to create an iPad version. Incredible. And once the game is finished, it starts living its own life, which is fascinating. I'm happy to see that it continues to inspire many people, often kids, to create something, whether it's all sorts of fun art or their own indie games. And I also want to add that the original team is still together. It's expanded a little with other talented people, and we are currently working on a secret project we'd like to announce next year. And the very last thing is that we are working on in Amanita Design on a game which is already announced. We want to release it hopefully next year. It's called Phonopolis, and it's in a game inspired by some books of Karel Čapek as well, I mentioned earlier, but also by Machinarium. And there are some similarities, and now I want to show you a trailer, and that would be it. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.